Hey guys, it's me, Mikey again. Nice to see everybody. Welcome to another installment of one of my video diaries, where I'm going to talk a little bit about my life with one leg and the experiences that come with it. So no matter who you are, please enjoy another little walk in my shoe. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those of you that saw my last video, I should say my first video on my experiences, just general growing up and how my day in and day out goes having one leg or having a prosthetic. And what I decided to discuss today are several things that people have said either to me or about me in my presence throughout my life. So some of this is meant to be fun, and while there is a real experience behind this, and I don't mean to make light or justify some of the things that people have said, it's still something that I pour humor into where possible, because talking about this is definitely something that brings to my mind a little bit of a humorous twist, even though, as you'll see in a little bit, some of these were actually pretty bad things. So when I am talking about the more serious ones, I will make sure to try to fix this. I'll try to fix this face. But hey, it's my life, so I guess I can do whatever I want when it comes down to it. So here we go. Craziest things said to me throughout my life about my leg. Number one, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the more serious ones out of the way. So when I was in 5th grade, I was definitely a quiet, more solitary kind of child, and I liked to spend time on my own. I was probably thinking about, I don't know, Mario, Pokemon, or something. My mind was in other places when I was on the playground. It wasn't really in who I was going to play with. It was more my imagination. So I remember being in 5th grade, and I had, obviously I had my prosthetic on, and I was walking around the elementary school bathrooms, and I remember a few who I presume were around 2nd or 3rd grade. So I'm just going to say 3rd graders for the sake of this video. So these 2 3rd graders come up to me, 2 boys, and I remember they were noticeably shorter than me. And they come up to me, and I remember the boys pointing at my leg. And one of them said something along the lines of,
"Oh, is that a robot leg?"
And that's nothing offensive. I think that's just from lack of vocabulary. I think people, especially children, will allude to robots or robotics, because let's be honest, that's not far from the truth. Now, this child says, "Is that a robot leg?" And I remember in my 5th grade mind, I was putting on my maturity cap. I go to explain about my condition. I was going to say something like, I was born without a tibia, this is a prosthetic leg. And as I reached down to gesture in such a way that I was showing them my knee or my components, these 2 boys in unison at the same time scream at the top of their lungs. Like comedic, like Nickelodeon Are You Afraid of the Dark, like scream. And they bolt in the opposite direction and start running down what I remember was like I don't know, what you would call it, the street, where all the classrooms were, the hall basically outdoors. And they start pounding on a teacher's door, presumably their teacher. And I see in the distance, a few buildings down, the door open, and out pops, the head of actually who was at one time my 2nd grade teacher. And I see them pointing from a distance. So these 2 boys are pointing at me and yelling like I was a monster, like as if I was about to hurt them. Mind you, they had just asked me if it was a robot. So I think they thought I was gonna go like full on Terminator on them, which, I wasn't fully mature yet. So I remember in my mind, I thought, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. I don't want to get in trouble was all I thought. And so I look back on that now and I go, I wonder how this story, is told from the perspective of those 2 boys.
Dude, man, when we were in elementary school, we went to school with like a robot, man.
I don't know where to take that at this point. It was just more of something that happened to me. And I remember being ashamed. I remember feeling Like, okay, I guess I'm just this freak, you know. Obviously, I got over that. So I remember in middle school, so a few years later, when, the worst time of life, just objectively, middle school, just for your average American kid, middle school, objectively worst time of the average person's life. And I remember one of the guys that I was friends, or I shouldn't say guy, one of the boys that I was friends with at the time, just passive, hangout friends with. I don't remember what the conversation was. And this is around the time, when everyone's beginning to talk about, their adolescent topics. And I remember, I don't know how the conversation came up, but this boy had looked at me, and it was in the context of, like finding a girlfriend or something.
Yeah. Oh, honey.
And I remember this boy just looks at me, and out of the blue, like I wasn't even part of this conversation. I was just kind of there with him and some other people. And he said something along the lines of, hopefully you can find like a girl that doesn't have a leg so that you can, have a relationship someday, or something like that. And, the audacity. But being in middle school, I legitimately, I think when we were younger, we take more in from our environment and we take it as fact. And I remember that sat with me for a long time, as far as, thinking that, having a difference or having a disability is some sort of like grade below not having one, I think was one misconception I got from that. And then B, that the only suitable mates, whoever they may be, for somebody with a difference is someone else with a difference. And so looking back now, obviously I wasn't the one that projected that onto myself. That was projected to me from somebody else. So that's something that took me a while to get over, even into my adulthood. Not just that specific incident, but that was just, one drop in the bucket in the big picture of what I had to deconstruct later in life. So high school, this one was probably the most serious. And I remember this one actually hurt the most because it was malicious. I think these previous two weren't malicious. Those were just middle school and elementary school boys just saying things based on faulty, ignorant assumptions of the world and how it worked. So I was in this drama class. I don't remember if it was drama or technical theater, but it was one of those classes. I was in 9th grade. And we were sitting in the auditorium. That's where we held our classes. And there was this guy in the class. I remember his name. I'm not going to say it for the sake of this video, but there was this guy, and I remember I was talking to somebody, and I don't remember what it was about. I wasn't even talking to this other guy or the girls he was sitting with. And I remember I was on stage for something because the teacher needed something, or I was going to grab something, and I did this kind of, hobble, let's just say, from across the stage. And I had my prosthetic on. And obviously the way that I'm going to run or move is not going to look exactly like someone else might look and run and walk, etc. And so after I finished doing the errand or whatever it was I was doing, and I sat back down, I saw the guy say something to me and under his breath, but loud enough for everyone around him to hear. And after he said that, I remember the girls were gasped, they were shocked at what he said. And these were like his friends, I guess, like people he was sitting with. And I looked at somebody sitting next to me and I was like, what did he say? And she almost didn't want to tell me. And they kind of in this subtle, meek way were trying to defend me. But again, I didn't know what they were telling, I don't know what they were scolding him meekly for was. And so finally one of the girls leans in and she goes, he said, I saw how you were running, gimp. And I didn't even know what that word meant. And I had to ask this girl, this poor girl, I had to go, what does that mean? What's gimp? And so she had to explain to me what that means. And she had to explain to me what that word meant. And I remember kind of doing this, acting like I didn't care. I mean, I was obviously upset and mad at this guy, I felt hurt by it. And he just had this look on his face like he knew he had said something bad, but was gonna stick with it. And nothing ever came of it. I mean, I remember I just kind of said something, and kind of looked at him and gave a little frown. But I mean, I didn't start a fight, or I didn't do anything more than just kind of look back at him with disapproval. But that was the only time I think in school that I remember that I was like overtly, like very aggressively, spoken down to in that way. So that was very interesting. I always wonder what that dude's doing nowadays. So a few more years later, well, many more years later. So when I was teaching 4th grade, so this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I was tutoring a student in the morning. So one of the students because I taught math and science for like 4th grade, and I had a young boy that I was tutoring in the class. And I remember his little sister, who I ended up having later in my class. So one of those big personality, going far in life, but no filter, just word vomit, whatever comes out, comes out. And well, first she comes in the room and she goes, "It smells in here." She was in 2nd grade, so she was little. And then one morning she just comes in and she just looks at me directly in the face and she goes,
"Mr. Hanson, why'd your leg fall off?"
So, obviously I thought that was very humorous and very cute. And I gave her a very teacher-esque adult response back to it, but that was one of the funniest things I had ever heard. So yeah, I imitated that a lot, and the rest of the staff loved it. There was a few years later after that. This was pretty recently. I want to say this was just up until like 2019, even 2020, this could have happened. And I was in line at the pharmacy, and there was an older woman, maybe in her 60s or 70s, was ahead of me in the line. And the pharmacist was over there doing his thing, and he was trying to wave at us. And I think the woman was talking to me or something. There had to have been some reason for him to, he was waving like next kind of thing. And so we do the whole, "Oh, you go first. Oh no, you go first." And so finally I insist. I'm like, "Please, you were here first. Go ahead." So this woman walks up to the pharmacy counter and she has a little exchange with the pharmacist. I'm on my phone, I'm not paying attention. And I hear her say, "Well, young man, life's a game of love and war. And this guy back here looks like he's been in war." And so, yeah, that was kind of interesting. That guy looked super uncomfortable, and I had to act like I did not hear that whole thing. So yeah, presumptiveness can be something very interesting. But here's my favorite. This is my favorite thing anyone has ever said to me. And this might have been the most recent one. I'm not 100% sure. That pharmacy one could have been more recent. But I was with a bunch of friends in San Diego, like in Hillcrest, San Diego, and we're walking down the street, big crowds at this time, and we're walking towards a restaurant. And in the crowd, while we're in transit, in motion, there was a guy there that I just felt a pat on my back. It was a stranger, and he was kind of getting my attention. And I look over, and there's just this guy, and he's just very intent. One of those people that gets really kind of close into your face. And he goes,
"What happened?"
And and he was a little shorter, so I'm looking down at him, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, while, mind you, we're walking through a crowd." And so I go, "Oh," and I give him the short answer. "Well, I was born without a tibia, it's the bone down here, and so I've always had this, prosthetic." And so the guy looks at me, and he confused, presumably.
"Is there a fix for that?"
And so my first inclination was to presume that he did not see that it was a prosthetic. I don't know if he understood that I had an amputation, and I may have reiterated that, like, well, if this is daylight. He clearly had vision, and he was looking. So I reiterated, "Well, I had an amputation, and this and that, so this is the fix. Like, this is the fix, right? Like, this is it. This is as good as it gets." And still, the guy looks at me, And this adult male asks me,
Yeah, but is it forever?
I'll leave it at that. Is that forever? Yeah.
It's forever.